How many difficult discussions do you have on any given day? You go into a room, you have this position, the person with whom you are talking has this position, and somehow you can't make those two ideas meet somewhere close to what you want to achieve. Colleen Magner is with Reos Partners. Her job is to go into that room and help people see eye to eye. I'm simplifying, but that's basically it, isn't it?
That's right.
Give me an example of the sort of issues you're dealing with, because this isn't sort of marriage counselling, although it's probably not dissimilar when it comes to professionals in the corporate sphere.
Yeah, the same principles apply. It's getting people out of their insecure, polarized positions and to see the bigger picture.
Typically, what do you deal with?
So typically what we deal with, it ranges, but it's basically when people that have very different interests have a collective problem. So for example, this year we've been doing some scenarios for a healthcare company, trying to understand how to navigate their way through all the changes that are happening in healthcare this year.
So randomly we choose the topic of national health insurance.
Right.
I may be a hospital and I've got a Department of Health which I feel wants to shut me down.
Right.
For example.
Right.
Now, Department of Health, it would be suicidal for the Department of Health to shut you down, but it's hard not to feel as though you might be shut down. Tell me how that process works.
So they come to us and say, okay, we are feeling polarized, we're not sure how to work our way through strategy in the next 10 years. And our approach is, well, you've got to be able to see this problem from multiple perspectives. You need to find a way to get in the room with the people that are going to determine your future. And even if you don't agree exactly on what the next steps are, being able to understand where they come from will help you navigate the way through. So in this particular situation, we use the process of scenario building. Scenarios is quite an unthreatening or non-threatening way of getting people into a room to talk about the future. The only way that those parties interact at the moment, and this is a typical South African situation, is through letters to the press. You get the CEO saying, oh, what you said's wrong, and then you get the minister standing up and saying, you're evil, and increasing polarized positions. So, you know, the way that you do it is to find a process or an invitation that's compelling enough for people to say, how can we face the same direction in addressing this issue? So for example, we recently facilitated quite a high stakes meeting between kind of ministerial level and CEOs to talk about the South African situation and the economy in particular. And you know what was interesting about that discussion, which didn't go so well, is that it was so inward focused. It was about your position and our position. Government was saying there isn't a crisis, business saying there is a crisis. Okay, that's changed. This was 6 months ago. Okay.
Yes.
And you're stuck. You cannot actually move beyond your position. So what will help you move beyond your position is not by facing each other from opposite ends of the room, but to look at something that affects both of you on the outside. So let's think about possible futures. That's scenarios. It's not hedging your bets on one future. It's saying, let's take a slightly more detached view. What are the things that are going to influence our future that are playing out right now? Those are called drivers. And in that conversation of saying, oh, you know, I think political stability is going to be a key driver, and then you speak to somebody and their perspective about what political stability means, and you speak to a private sector player, it's very different. And then you've got to work it out. You know, what's our common definition of political stability?
But how do you go into a room where there is a frisson and a tension, and
right.
it's not even, just before a thunderstorm, you feel the static in the air.
Right.
And that's often when you walk into a room.
Right.
I mean, from my position, I love it because it
Yes.
suggests conflict.
Yes.
You come from the opposite position because you're going, hold on a second, the conflict can be useful to get to a
Yes.
resolution, perhaps.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So one of the things that people make the mistake of in this kind of work is to say, oh, let's just hug and love each other. You know, let's find a way to be friends. This is not what that's about at all. This isn't about people being friends. It is moving through the conflict. That's what it's about. So you have to create some space to say, we have different views on this particular issue. The most important thing, which is the compelling invitation I was talking about, is that there's a common agreement that there's a problem, and that the problem has the same kind of level of stakes to both sides. When you get, and this happens often, one party thinks it's a real problem, we bring them in the room and the other's like, what's the problem? You know, there's no problem because we're in charge, we've got the upper hand here, and you're just making a noise on the side. You know, that's, you've got to make sure that there is significant traction on both sides. So that's the first thing. The second thing on the issue of conflict is you do need to create an environment. You need people in a room for longer than a few hours. It kind of typically takes a commitment to saying we're going to meet 3 or 4 times. It might be half a day, a full day, 2 days. But you need to move through the, I'm sad to say, the typical human cycle of moving through conflict and creating trust. This is why I feel strongly about it, and this is why you're wrong. Creating the environment for that to come up and allowing a process that it's not stuck there.
Yeah, and that's the trouble though, because if you've got two polar opposites and you need to come to a common solution, or at least a common understanding of the problem, you can present the fact. South Africa has 20 million disaffected people, of whom 16 million are on a state grant. Is that sustainable? Or whatever the case might be. Basic issue. There's a common basis. We can both agree there's a number, there's an issue, and there's a limited amount of money. How do we solve that problem? It's about finding the commonality in the conflict to say, right, now we can agree what the problem is. How do we tackle that problem?
And the thing that we lack is imagination on how to show your position or show your perspective of a particular problem. What we do, typically, at a business school or in these kind of roundtables, is get a panel of experts, and they each represent the interests of the people in the audience or the people that want to come together around the table. They kind of very eloquently present their argument, and you just more deeply entrench a particular view in that way. So I'm not discounting that information. Data's often quite illuminating. It's not the thing that breaks through. I don't know if you've read this in one of Jonathan Janssen's books, but apparently he had a kind of 3-hour session with Julius Malema. After Malema was so scathing of him, do you remember? And you know, there was all sorts of death threats going his way and stuff like that. They had a 3-hour, apparently transformative experience. And in speaking to Jonathan Jansen, it was, I mean, look, each has gone back to their own position, and it's kind of water under the bridge now. But it's that kind of conversation that has to happen. Nobody knows what happened there. Nobody knows what the experience was, but you've got to give up something. What are you giving up?
Yeah, exactly. What are you giving up? What is really that important to hold on to? Quite often, when it comes to the big hug, it just makes it easier to put the knife in the back. Colleen Magner is a partner at Reos Partners.